Well, hi everyone. It's Tim Simons here again, and it is really my honour and privilege to have my good friend Lehan Stemmet with me today. Lehan is probably one of the most intelligent people I've met in my life. He's an awesome man. He's incredibly well studied, incredibly well qualified. Just a bit of background: he has a Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry and molecular biology, microbiology, and psychology. I mean, I'm battling to pronounce all these things. He has a master's degree in medicine and biological science. He has doctorates in neuroscience and experimental psychology. And his research has been published in a number of countries, including America, Canada, New Zealand, Denmark, India, and South Africa. He's a keynote speaker at various conferences, both public and private sector conferences. He has a very popular YouTube TED Talk. He specializes in a number of areas, but mainly in the areas of leadership, management, capability development, resilience, coaching, mentoring, career development. He's just one of those superstars and down to earth, just a heck of a nice guy. And so welcome, Lehan. It's a huge honor for me to have you join me here today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Well, thanks, Tim. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to talk to you as always. I mean, I really enjoy every meeting we had. I think I come away enriched. I come away motivated and inspired. So I think I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you since the day that you sent me the initial email. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation at where it's going.
Fantastic.
Thanks for the introduction. You make it all sound so wonderful. It doesn't. I promise you, it sounds more glorious than it really was.
I think I missed out a few, so I apologize for that. But
no worries.
I get really intimidated when I read through the list. So you know where we are at the moment. As a consequence of this COVID-19, there are many people who have obviously in our community and our friendship groups, and maybe some who are watching in this video will have lost incomes, they've lost jobs, maybe they just had a small business or ran a mom and pop store, had a restaurant, whatever it is, and they've lost that business as well. Coupled with that, there's this whole uncertainty thing. When will things return to normal, and what will normal look like in the coming months and the coming years? And so I know it's a huge subject, but what would you tell someone at the moment who's sort of feeling overwhelmed and depressed, anxious, and just so concerned about the uncertainty that we face now?
I think Tim, and I think it's a big question. I think my usual approach with something like that would be that I probably won't tell them anything in the first instance. I'd probably first listen to them, and I'd probably listen to, and I'm saying this for the benefit of people who are going through this, but also for the benefit of people who might know people who are going through a really tough situation. I'd probably first listen to them and just kind of find out where they're at. And some people might need to just vent. Some people might want to just have a bit of some people think by talking to someone else about it. But what I would say is it's an unusual set of circumstances, and it's probably something many of us haven't experienced. But for some of us who are a little bit older, we've experienced things like SARS, we've experienced the Gulf War, and that was going to be the end of the world. We've experienced Y2K, and that was going to be the end of the world as well. Planes flying out of falling out of the sky. And so, in terms of this being a crisis, we've been through several of similar situations, which might have not have been a pandemic to this extent, but we've recovered as a global society. We've recovered from the Spanish flu, for example. A guy like Newton, I don't know how many people know this, but a guy like Newton used I think there was some plague or something in the UK back in the days, and he used that time to develop some of his most well-known theories. So I think one of the things I would say is acknowledge the feelings and the emotions that we're going through. Don't try to not acknowledge them. It's important that we acknowledge the stuff that we're going through, face the reality of what we're going through, and then as soon as possible, try our absolute best to start thinking more of solutions. So if we're going to talk about resilience, one of the key things I often find with resilient people is that they think more about possible solutions than they think about the problem that they're facing. And quite frankly, our brain can only handle those two thoughts, either what is the solution or what is the problem. And thinking about the problem doesn't give us a solution, but thinking about a solution always gives us some kind of a solution. And the second thing I would say to that as well is, and we can go into coping strategies if we get to that, but I think this is for me more about being pragmatic. And one of the key things, if we, for example, are in a situation where our business is failing or where we made redundant, having been through those situations several times, you might not, but I've been made redundant in several different roles in the past. And one of the key things that worked for me is to set achievable goals that align with me getting out of the situation that I'm in. So what I mean by that is, achievable goals might be mowing the lawn, it might be doing the dishes, it might be cleaning the house, but often those things become distractions. What I mean by achievable goals that align with whatever's going to get me out of it is, an achievable goal will be things like get my LinkedIn profile up to date, make sure it's up to scratch, sort out my CV, connect with a couple of people, because what we need now is being resourceful. So we might not have the resources, but we have to be resourceful. And resourceful is often through our connections. It's making connections with the people that you know and see, where there might be a gap. And achievable goals are really important, because those little achievable goals, like today I'm going to fix up my CV, today I'm going to fix up my LinkedIn profile, today I'm going to contact 5 of my friends and just see what's available. Those kinds of things. Setting an achievable goal gives you something to achieve. And having a sense of achievement in those small goals gives you a sense of progress. And having a sense of progress is absolutely vital to our motivation, our engagement, and just being focused on something that is not the problem, but at least we're working towards a solution. I think those will be some quick, practical things we can do tomorrow, this evening, whenever. You know what I mean? It's pretty simple things, but they're very powerful. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the power in those little habits, those little things we do and achieve.
Sure. I know that this is one of the encouragements that my wife does with my sons, particularly when they were growing up, was when they were on holiday, and even now when we got them at home, she always sort of insists that the first thing you should do when you get up in the morning is make your bed. And even if you do that, it's sort of getting yourself organized. And they say, well, why should I make my bed? I'm going to climb back into it in a couple more hours. And there's a level of logic into it, but it's that you need to accomplish things, I think, even if there are those small steps during the day, so that you can actually accomplish the bigger ones. So, every morning you get up, make your bed, have a shower, have a shave, whatever, wash your hair, do whatever it is, actually get in a routine. I think it's really important to, as you said, is to actually set those goals. So you can get those small little goals, make the bed and things like that, but those bigger goals. In fact, I was listening to someone talking on a podcast on finance advice NZ, and he was saying you should set yourself 3 goals every day, at a minimum of 3. During this lockdown period, I want to accomplish the following 3 tasks today. And so that could be updating your LinkedIn profile. It could be contacting 5 people you haven't spoken to for the last year. Things like that. So literally every morning setting achievable goals that you can sit back at the end of the day and say, yeah, I knocked off those 3. What can I do tomorrow? So
I think it's a good point, and I've shared on the social media. I've recently shared two little quotes. The one is from Nelson Mandela, and the other one is from Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was in various concentration camps for 3 years. And if you want to talk about a 4-week, 5-week lockdown period, we're talking about 3 years in a solid lockdown that also involved a whole lot of torture and a whole bunch of other things. And if we think about a guy like Nelson Mandela, he was in jail for 27 years. That's about 1,400 weeks. And so I think what kept those 2 guys going is 3 things. The first thing is they had a big goal, mission, purpose. But that's not always achievable in a specific day. That often takes a pretty long period of time. The second thing they had is those little achievable goals. They had little activities and things that kept them proactively busy. And those activities often involved other people. So altruism within whatever context we have, I find is also a massive coping strategy for people. So you kind of forget about the situation that you're in by contributing positively to other people. We all have skills. And I think one of the things that's interesting is I know someone who is an industrial psychologist. He's a couple of years younger than me, and I'm sort of mentoring this guy. And one of the things he said, which was quite useful for me, being of a different generation, is one of the things that's changed in the world these days is back when I was younger, when you were younger, a couple of us were younger, one of the things that was valuable was who you know. And what's changed since then is that still is important, is who do you know, but it's also equally important to make sure that there are people who also know about you. And so what I mean by that is being confined to your space and only the people that you know and only the people that you connect with usually doesn't necessarily open doors to other people who also need to know about you and the skills that you have and the contribution that you can make to the organizations, either as a contractor, temporary worker, full-time worker, or potentially starting a business venture with them. So I think all of that boils down to being quite proactive. And I think the word I want to use is intentional. It must be intentional, it must be aligned, there must be a purpose to it as well.
I'm not too sure if I heard it from you or from someone else fairly recently. And I think you used the word rumination quite a bit, and having heard your presentation of the past, and if I recall correctly, rumination is that kind of self-analysis, sort of dwelling on the issue and saying, how can I cope with what's happening to me right now? Whereas resilience is actually putting into place strategies to cope with the future. And maybe I'm doing the 0.01 kind of psychology paper here, but the point is, I think that we can actually get so bogged down in the bad news, in the 45 minutes of the 1 hour news broadcast all about COVID-19. It's all kind of bad news. And so we tend to retreat into our shells and just try and survive. Whereas we can't keep on doing that. We have to have a strategy to get out. That's what, historically, I've always thought resilience has been strong and actually standing still. In fact, resilience, I don't think is standing still. Resilience is actually moving forward, but in a way that's very strategic.
Spot on. I think you've done a lot of justice to that description. And rumination is an emotional response, and it's well known to be the key contributor to psychological and physiological ill health that relates to stress response. And basically what it boils down to is we continuously think about worst case scenarios that might or might never happen. So it's the what if questions. What if I never get a job? And it's like, well, that's kind of almost impossible in an economy like New Zealand. We've got a very low unemployment rate, and it's quite possible that will be difficult for a few weeks, a few months, but eventually there will be an income. And so what we need to do is within that, rumination is the same as meditation. The only difference between the two is rumination is thinking about negative things and meditation is thinking about positive things. Rumination, I think one of the best ways to describe it also in terms of action is rumination is kind of like sitting in the rocking chair and you're rocking back and forth and you feel like you're doing something, but actually nothing's happening. You're not moving anywhere, you're not getting out, you're not meeting anybody, you're not talking to anybody. And that only has one consequence. There's only one possible outcome for that if we sit in one spot. And I think there's a lot of value in being proactive and thinking about things that we can do. It's not easy. It's pretty tough. It's pretty difficult. But it's almost like a constant reminder. We've got to catch ourselves. And I think what I always say to people is don't deny the emotion. Let the emotion. So if you feel a bit panicked or stressed about something, let the emotion come in. Acknowledge it. It's like, yep, this is the way I feel. Because the opposite of that is called avoidance coping. Avoidance coping is not also dealing with the stuff you should be dealing with. But so acknowledge it, but don't let it stay. I feel a little bit stressed, and then move on. Go and do something positive, go and do something constructive, and I think connect with people. We also shouldn't underestimate the value of connecting with people. Connectivity, they call it connectedness. It's a clear indicator of longevity as well.
No, awesome. No, that's fantastic. Leon, I know we could certainly expand on that subject quite significantly, but there's another question I'd like to ask you. And you are a senior academic in business and applied management, and I was wondering if you could sort of look in your crystal ball or whatever you look at, the stars or the Bible or wherever you may look to see, what do you think New Zealand business is going to look like post COVID-19, and what business opportunities do you think are going to potentially arise out of this? Because I think there is going to be a new normal. I don't think it's going to be the same as it was business as usual. I think there are going to be some changes, but out of every whenever there are changes, I mentioned this to David Powell the other day that George Suarez, a great investor, he always says the best time to invest in a country is when there's blood on the streets. And right now there's pretty much blood on every street in the world, through what's happened. And so, do you foresee any interesting business trends and any potential opportunities coming out of this?
Well, I think I mean there's no doubt that the travel and tourism industry will be affected, and hospitality will be affected by this quite severely. And also event management industries. So I think those industries will see a major impact on this. However, what it does is it also creates alternative ways of looking at things. One of the big challenges for New Zealand, I think, is because we've got so many small businesses, is that what makes a small business tick is cash flow. And I think one of the storms we have to wear is this whole cash flow issue. If we can wear the storm of cash flow, we should be okay on the other end of that as well. But I don't know necessarily how many small businesses have those sorts of cash reserves. I'm just looking at my own. As much as I've got a full-time job, I also have a small business that I run, and there's several deals that we simply cannot do anymore because they were based on speaking engagement, and there's no way you can do a speaking engagement. Because you can't go to a big auditorium with a whole bunch of people anymore. It's just not viable. But there are other opportunities. So I'll give you one opportunity just for that is when we, for example, don't cancel an event and we still run the event, but we do it online. What we managed to do is actually have, instead of an auditorium that was going to be pretty expensive with a lot of travel expenses around that, 1,000 people, well, suddenly we're sitting with 4,000 people listening to the same thing, and I'm sitting where I'm sitting right now. It costs us nothing. And so what that also means is the whole opportunity to attend something like that for people is much cheaper. There's no flights, there's no accommodation, there's no travel, there's no et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there will be sort of a lot of opportunities to do things more cost effectively as well, differently, to use technology. I think the technology business itself will probably benefit a lot from this. I think online businesses, if you have an online business, that will probably benefit quite a bit from this sort of thing as well. Just in our family, our online ordering has gone up exponentially. So I think there are benefits and there are trends that we need to look for. In education, in the education sector, that's also changed quite a bit. Where I work, we have gone completely online. And what I find really amazing is when you're hit with a crisis, how quickly you can mobilize to do something that took years to do. So it's the old Cotter's burning platform. It's been given to us, and you can either stay on the platform and burn with it, or you just jump and find out whether there's something to hang on, and eventually you'll reach the shore. So keep on paddling. So we've gone online teaching for all our courses within about a week, I would say, and it's pretty good. I also hear that some of the universities in the United States are thinking of not teaching anything face-to-face until 2021. So what that does is it also opens up a massive opportunity. Generally speaking, during a recession or during a poor economy, tertiary education also seems to pick up. So I think there's a general trend for people when they are without a job and they are reevaluating their skill sets. It seems like they are reskilling and upskilling as well. So with the government's study packages, that might be another opportunity for people, as this is a time to reskill, upskill, et cetera, et cetera. So I think retail will continue to do reasonably okay, because those are just consumables that we need all the time. I mean, that hasn't changed. But I think travel tourism, that's going to take a dent for at least for a couple of months. We're not going to see that happen or change very rapidly. And so I think all consumables will be reasonably good. Maybe this is an opportunity for someone to start a business delivering. I don't know if the retail businesses can keep up with the deliveries, for example. Let's say, for example, more people go into, can they? Is this the time to invest in buying a container of goods and start selling from a container. Like, there's so many opportunities. I think that'll open up.
Yeah, maybe we can buy some oil at the moment. You can, you don't even have to pay for it. They'll pay for you to take it.
And they will take it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because David Powell mentioned in my discussion with him the other day that he felt that we've realised up to now, or over the last few years anyway, New Zealand, like most countries, has abdicated their manufacturing capability and supply chain to overseas countries, to offshore countries, and in particular, into Asia. And what we've realised is that these are not always that, they are susceptible to disruptions. And,
they are.
And so we could actually see a resurgence of New Zealand manufacturing in certain areas, not in all areas.
Yep.
And the old mantra, buy New Zealand and support local businesses. I've got a friend of mine who said he wasn't going to go and stand in the queue at the big supermarket. But everyone, he went to the local dairy and he spent an extra $10 or $20 on the goods that he was buying. But he walked in, he bought them, he walked out, he supported his local guy, and he felt good about it. And I think maybe we're seeing that. Maybe the Davids are actually taking on the Goliaths, and having that opportunity to pick up business, whereas before everyone sort of flocked to the big boys or got their manufacturing offshore. Are suddenly saying, well, no, we need to actually support locals.
I think it's a really good point, and what you've mentioned just reminded me of an article that was published in one of the mainstream scientific magazines. So obviously, if it's published in there, it's based on some sort of research, but it's just written in a more collegial, kind of colloquial kind of language for everybody to understand. But I remember seeing this.
Like me,
yeah, well, people like me, if I'm not a specialist in something, I really struggle with some of those terms. But I think, I can't remember the name of the magazine, and I might go and look it up. But basically what they looked at is, if you have to start an economy from scratch, and this is the time to go and look at those sort of articles. But basically what it boiled down to is, if you've got to start an economy from scratch, you start local, and what they had is like little, sort of like a beehive, and you've got these little cells, and every cell represents call it a region. So in our context, it will be Botany, it will be Highland Park, it will be Dannemora, maybe Flatbush, for example, Takaranga. So each of those are represented by one of these sort of little hexagons, and inside that you've got a school that serves that community. You've got a doctor that serves that community. You've got a petrol station that serves that community, a convenience store, retail, etc., etc. So you kind of cluster these within those communities, and then you've got sets of those communities together where you might have your bigger sort of mall that serves more of them. And then they expand on that over and over and over again. And it's what impressed me about that in theory is how scalable it is. It was very scalable. And the other thing that surprised me about it is how you might eventually have service people, for example. It's a service economy then. It serves the local community. But if the guy who serves, let's say, the plumbing in this community is not available, he can go and help out in another place where there might be a bigger issue. And so you have this service collaborative kind of economy working. And it seemed like a pretty good idea in theory. And I think there are parts it's somewhere in Europe where they've already started trialing that. And it would be really interesting to see. I mean, obviously it changes your power supply grid, for example, as well. And so I think there's a whole bunch of possibilities that we might even look at in terms of that. Whether the COVID-19, call it a crisis, is a big enough crisis for long enough for us to have to be forced into something like that, I don't know, and I don't think so. But I think it might be worth considering those sorts of ideas because conceptually they do make a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Well, Leon, your time is limited, and so I just really want to say once again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I'm sure that the people who listen or watch this will it will have been really insightful for them. So thank you very much. Really, I can't wait to actually have a proper coffee with you, sit down in the same room, in the same location, in the same coffee shop and be able to spend probably a couple of hours again, take up some more of your time. But thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And hey, all the best. And yeah, once again, thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you very much, Tim. It's been great chatting to you, and I love the stuff that you do, and I think is great and very valuable for people as well. So good on you for doing this. Thank you.
Awesome. Good to see you.
Cheers.